Tony Khan is the owner of All Elite Wrestling, and today on Elite Heat, we're going to be bringing to you an all-encompassing bio on one TK. This bio, I mean, Kevin, there's so much to go through when it comes to Tony Khan, his company, AEW, even stuff like Fulham FC, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Plenty of stuff to go over. Talking about that, what are some of the things we're going to go over today?
Yeah, I'll set the table for what people should be expecting from this bio. We're not going to be talking about, Tony Khan, the man, the human being, his personal life, nothing like that. We're going to really talk about Tony Khan, the wrestling booker, the writer, however you want to coin that phrase, whatever you want to refer to him as, the owner of AEW, the Twitter personality, maybe a little bit of the football personality, both international football and American football. We're going to talk, just about that, his professional career. And we're going to talk heavily about AEW and what we think AEW is doing right, what we think AEW is doing wrong. So I guess you could say this is kind of like a first year and a half, first 2 years, I should say, a first 2 year perspective of AEW.
Yeah, it kind of like a state of AEW address. Like we had that plan to do, but I think talking about Tony Khan, talking about his booking of AEW, this is going to basically be an AEW State of the Union address almost. It's going to be, as well, as you say there, an AEW in review almost. Like, obviously, we're not going to go through pay-per-view by pay-per-view, decision after decision. That's not exactly what we're going to do at all. We're just going to go over the main things that Tony Khan has done, with the booking of his promotion, how Tony Khan's gone about the first 2.5 somewhat years of AEW, and going forward, the next 6 months, next year, 2 years, 3 years. It'll be interesting to look back upon this bio, Kevin, in a year or two and see where AEW is and what Tony Khan's done from there,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you look at Tony Khan, I guess you could say he's a visionary. You could say he's a revolutionary in the wrestling world. And I guess you could say in the NFL and in the football world, you could say he's a bit of a revolutionary. But that's kind of what the guy does. He's given us AEW. He's given us an alternative, good or bad, whether you like it or you hate it or you love it or you're super diehard, whatever it is, wherever you fall into the spectrum with AEW, we have to admit that AEW is something special. And I guess we have to thank Tony Khan for that, right? Like, he's pretty much the main guy, because without him, AEW wouldn't be a thing.
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, we've done this song and dance several times in Elite Heat over the course of our now 22, 23 episodes. WWE and wrestling as a whole in 2018 and the years, preceding that was in a dire spot. Like WWE, especially in 2018, was awful. AEW, Tony Khan came along providing an alternative. Tony Khan and the Khan family were the financial backing that makes this new company, this alternative, this, I guess you could call it competitor, possible. They made it viable. So, yeah, absolutely right, Kevin. I mean, without Tony Khan, this isn't a thing. The amount of content we wouldn't have had, it just is insane.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, we don't really have a format or a structure, so I guess I'll just ask you, like, where do you want to take this open forum? Like, what do you want to start with?
Oh, there's so many things like we can talk about with this. I mean, some of the things we could start with his either relationship and, how he gets on with Dave Meltzer and how that influences AEW, or we could talk about his style of booking. Or I think where we'll go to start this off, Kevin, personally, well, let's look at right now. State of the AEW products. What do you feel like Tony Khan as a booker is doing well? What's he not doing well? Let's start there. What do you think?
I would say what he's doing really well, and you could argue is the best thing that he does, is he knows his audience and he knows what his audience wants, and he serves that audience. And that's not something you can say about WWE and Vince McMahon in particular. They don't necessarily appear, or they don't come off like they're serving their fans. With AEW, it's clear as day. It's evident with every decision they make. They have what their fan base wants and needs in mind. The fan base, they wanted a Bullet Club reunion. Well, guess what? We got a Bullet Club reunion. The fan base wanted a New Japan crossover. We got a New Japan crossover. The fan base wanted Warhorse to answer Cody Rhodes' TNT title open challenge, we got it. And so on and so forth. You get my point.
Yeah, because I think one of the things as well with that, Tony Khan, throughout the 2.5 years of AEW, one thing he's done well as a promoter, as a booker, one thing he has done well is have the finger on the pulse enough to make decisions that need to be made, make changes that need to be made. I remember, I believe it was the Nightmare Collective with Brandy Rhodes and whoever else was in it. I think Luther, and there was another couple in there.
Kong?
I remember, yes. I remember they debuted that. They had them on TV for like 2 weeks, and then the feedback was overwhelmingly negative, and Tony Khan made the decision to just pull the plug on that and just not make that a thing anymore, which that's good because if we look at the E-Pal, WWE would have ran that into the ground for like 4 to 5 months. And by the end of it, you would have just never wanted to watch wrestling again. So Tony Khan is adaptable most of the time, responsive to feedback, trying to improve. That's a definite plus, I think, Kevin.
Absolutely. And I would say another overwhelming positive that Tony Khan brings to the table is the way that he empowers his fans, good or bad, right or wrong. Like, there are some fans that they're exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, Tony Khan makes his fan base feel like they matter. He makes them feel like the invisible booker or the invisible writer, if you will. And it kind of goes hand in hand to what we just said, but he connects with them on a deeper level. He'll like tweet once in a while. Hey, what do you guys want to see in AEW? What wrestlers do you want to see us sign? What wrestlers do you think deserve a push? And you can tell he's actively listening. And these points go hand in hand, but I guess a sense of community is something that we haven't really seen from like a mainstream wrestling company. Not a mainstream, but a wrestling company with a grand stage like AEW has.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, like indie promotions, as you kind of like allude to there, like ones with very small followings, of course, have that kind of community atmosphere to them almost. But the fact that Tony Khan has such a big platform with a deal on TNT, all these big name wrestlers, Jericho, Sting, Cody, like all these wrestlers, the fact that there is that sense of fans feel so attached to it, which we're going to talk in great depth throughout this bio about more so the negatives that spawn from this. But the fact that fans feel so entrenched with AEW, fans have seen this ever since it started. Ever since AEW became a thing and like really the foundations were laid in 2018 and then it became a thing in 2019 and they had their first episode of Dynamite, their first pay-per-view, this guy was signed, that guy was signed, this match happened, etc. These fans who really are in depth with AEW and love it feel so a part of it because, as you say, Tony Khan is receptive on social media. He listens. He puts those tweets out. What matches do you guys want to see on hashtag AEW Dynamite? What matches do you want to see to make AEW a stacked card this week? Like, the fans feel a part of it, and that's a really good thing for sure.
Absolutely. His positive mindset too. He always promotes his cards. He promotes every card like it's WrestleMania 17. And yep. You can knock him for it, but that's a pretty positive thing to have a positive outlook like that. Now I think the case you make is should he be doing that? Would you do that as a promoter? Like that's maybe the one angle to look at it. But the fact that he does it and he does it all the time and is consistent with it, you have to applaud it. You have to respect it, I think, to a certain degree.
Yeah. Obviously the counterpoint to that I'd make is that like the word stacked, especially like that word particularly, has been so grossly overused and diluted in the past, really ever since Tony Khan was, in this position with AEW. Literally every match is apparently stacked. I've been told that AEW Dark cards, where the most notable match is Shawn Spears versus some random bum off the street, is stacked. And I guess that comes from Tony Khan. That stems from the top when it comes to Tony Khan's promotion. But talking about the positive of that inherently is that they announce their matches in due time. Like that's a big thing with Tony Khan. They have their cards set up 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in advance. This isn't like WWE in the past, really 5 to 10 years, where you've got episodes of Raw being written as the show's going on. No matches are announced before the show, and all we know is like one segment's going to happen on a 3-hour show. Like Tony Khan, he has it all together when it comes to this is what's happening next week. And regardless of how that's promoted and how you think of the promotion of it, they haven't set in stone, Kevin. Right. These 4 great matches are happening. This stacked card is happening on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on TNT. Like, we know that's going to happen.
We get the classic Tony Khan tweet at like 10:05 p.m. Eastern time, right after Dynamite goes off the air. And he's like, all right, this is what we got next week. And he's tweeting out the whole card, and it gets people excited. It creates that like, oh man, I have to wait a whole other week for Dynamite.
Exactly. And then also inherently with that, I mean, you mentioned like the attitude of gratitude towards the fans. Basically every week it seems you have the Tony Khan tweet. Thank you to all our amazing #AW fans for supporting us and showing up to Daly's Place and watching us on TNT and buying our merch. Like those tweets are pretty common. Which that I do like to see. Like that kind of style is something I kind of go for myself as well. Just that an attitude of gratitude towards your audience, because these are the people who, help you run, So it's awesome to see from Tony Khan. But that kind of stuff I really do get around. That's great.
Absolutely. And I think the final positive that we could touch on, another one that really sticks out, is he's not afraid to take risks as a booker. He'll go out there and he'll put on, a death match or something, put on these type of matches where you have like Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega killing each other in a lights out, no holds barred match. And yeah, it's what the audience wants, and he's willing to do it. He's willing to have Chris Jericho and Orange Cassidy have a 3-month program where in WWE, if like Chris Jericho would have pitched to Vince McMahon, hey, I want to work with this Orange Cassidy guy, Vince would have laughed him out of the office, But Tony Khan is willing to do those things because he sees that a guy like Orange Cassidy is getting over. And he's like, all right, let's see what we can do. Let's see what Chris Jericho could do with him. Now, you could argue, did it work? Did it not? But overall, Tony Khan, he definitely takes more risks than some other wrestling promoters would.
Well, that's the other thing. And one of the reasons that's a thing is because Tony Khan and AEW, they listen a lot to their performers, which we're going to talk in this bio about the whole inmates running the asylum theory. And it can be really good, because you're listening to these performers, you're having faith in the performers, you're trusting these wrestlers who know their characters better than the higher ups do, to put on it, to understand the character and to book a storyline, and that can be really good. But at the same time, as we're going to probably go into, Kevin, it can be pretty detrimental as well. So that's definitely a positive and can be a negative, but that's something that's worth bringing up as well, Tony Khan. Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, and some other things, like he brought freaking wrestling back. He brought another wrestling promotion back to TNT and back to Warner Media. That's just awesome. Like that's just a great thing. Whether you like AEW's product or you don't, it's just an unbelievable feat that wrestling in 2021, as niche as it is, has 2 promotions, 2 companies that are on live TV in a prominent form.
And I guess that's the other thing. I mean, variety. Like, once, as you kind of say, is whether you love AEW or you hate it, hope it rots in hell and dies tomorrow, regardless of what you think of it, it's another promotion for you to have an opinion on. Whether you absolutely adore it or you hate it, there's something to watch on Wednesday nights. Even if you don't want to watch it, there's something there. In case you're ever bored on Wednesday night, I'll tune into AEW Dynamite this week. I'll see how they're going. Or if you're infatuated with it and you love it, that's something you can genuinely really look forward to every Wednesday night. That can be like the highlight of your week for a lot of people. And that's a really good thing as well. It gives people a purpose, especially during the pandemic. Like, that's one of these other things, Kevin. Mental health during the pandemic, not the greatest it's ever been by far. So the fact of the matter is, when you've got AEW Dynamite every Wednesday night to look forward to, that was a big thing for people. And the fact that Tony Khan and AEW kept offering that, regardless of what was on the shows, that doesn't matter. But the fact that they're putting on a show, giving people something to look forward to, giving people an option, a variety, an alternative, that's great to see.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about some of the negatives of Tony Khan's booking. Do you want to kick us off?
Oh, God almighty. Okay, this one, I want to talk about this one. I guess the style of booking, and yes, it's booking, it's not writing. What Tony Khan does usually is not writing. What usually happens really ever since, I guess, mid-2020, I dare say, Kevin, we'll talk about this more specifically in a moment, basically books a match. We can use the prime example of Kenny Omega, Park, Orange Cassidy, the AEW World Championship Triple Threat main event for Double or Nothing this year. Books the match, There's no real storyline of note. Just throws wrestlers into the ring, says, have a good match, and then that's really just go from there. Like and then to fill in between the match getting announced and the match happening, you usually have a bunch of WWE parody segments in between. Like that kind of thing, Kevin. I don't know what you think of that specifically, but I think that's a definite kind of problem, I think.
I can't really argue much with that. It's kind of WWE-ish in a way, where a lot of times it's just like, all right, at the pay-per-view, we're going to have like Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan at Fastlane, and then the story building up to it is there's not really much there. And is that like a wrestling problem? Is that a Tony Khan problem? You could argue that it is a wrestling problem. Because, I mean, there is like 12 months in the calendar year. It's nonstop. I can imagine it's extremely difficult to come up with a compelling story for every single pay-per-view match, 365 days a year, 52 weeks a year. I could imagine it's very tough. But I think we do see this, with all that being said, I do think we see this quite a bit in AEW, where some of the matches like don't really make a lot of sense. And I guess it's, again, catering to the fan base.
Yes, that's exactly. Yeah, I'll really quickly, I'll throw back to you. That's as well, I guess it's just listening to the audience, but at the same time, it's not really going to grow the audience, but it's such a tricky one. Like, yes, Khan caters to the 700,000 people who consistently watch every week on Dynamite and listen to them in that regard. But what they do with that is not going to attract 1 million plus. It's not going to attract 1.5, 2 million people to watch AEW Dynamite. So it's a negative in that sense, but at the same time, it's a positive because you're listening. It's a tricky one, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. And people want to see, people in general, like the general public, they want to see good stories. They want to see good writing. But AEW's fan base is not really interested in that. And I mean, that's evident in the fact that Dynamite as a whole, it's a 2-hour show, an hour and 30 minutes with commercials. And there's maybe 5 minutes of that as segments. And what are the segments? Like the Young Bucks bragging about how they're from Rancho Cucamonga and like kicking Tony Schiavone, or you get Dean Ambrose doing like a Stone Cold Dean Ambrose promo, or you get a 7-minute promo from Cody, and that's like pretty much it. The rest of the show is just matches, people getting beat up in the back, and more matches.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess we should phrase it like this. The problem that the flaw in Tony Khan's booking is that there's not enough emphasis on entertainment in his wrestling shows.
Yes. Yeah, because there's got to be that there. And
it's all about promoting wrestling as a sport. That's what he's all about. Oh, this is great action between two competitors, two athletes. It's basically what WWE tries to do. Like if you take out the Miz getting eaten by zombies and like some of the other ridiculous segments that we see, that's what 3 hours of Raw would be. Just matches of people getting beat up in the back. But AEW is kind of what it is, just matches. And it's just like a sport, you know?
Well, let's look at the why to that, Kevin. I mean, it's kind of because of what professional wrestling is nowadays. In that, like nowadays, few and far between are there wrestlers who are legitimate TV stars. Okay, like Russo's talked about this a bunch, and just the people who believe that kind of thing as well. TV stars are the Roman Reigns of the world, the Tribal Chief, or Austin, or like those types. They're like TV stars. Nowadays, wrestlers, particularly in AEW, they're just that. They're wrestlers, and that's just what the business is now. And Tony Khan caters to that, caters to them, the wrestlers, allows these wrestlers to show off their great execution of moves, even though sometimes in AEW there's a lot of bad botches, but nonetheless, like the wrestlers get to do their thing and have good matches. Tony Khan will book these enticing, compelling matchup combinations on Dynamite or on Dark or on Elevation, and the AEW audience will eat that up and say it's so stacked and it's amazing. But is that real compelling entertainment? Like if random Joe Schmo, some 32-year-old, just regular average male is just flipping the channels and they turn on and see Mad Nick Jackson from Rancho Cucamonga impersonating "I'm sorry, I love you" and slapping their thighs and kicking Christopher Daniels, who's got a blade next to his head as he's bleeding everywhere. Like, is that gonna compel? I don't know.
Can I pose this to you? I'll set a table for you. Imagine you hanging out with, or no, not this. Imagine, okay, a friend texts you and it's like, hey, come over. I got some people at the house. We're gonna have pizza. We're gonna order some wings. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna get some alcohol. We're gonna have a pretty good time. And you're like, all right, sounds good. You show up to the house and there's like 7 people sitting around a television watching AEW. Like, would you be like, oh wow, this is a great party. I'm gonna stay. Like, I'm gonna have a lot of fun. Or would you be like, I think I'll stay like 30 minutes to try to find a way out?
Yeah, that's a great point, because this is one of the things AEW, it just, a lot of it just lacks cool factor. And that's something which I'm sure will get negative feedback. Oh, why wrestling shouldn't need to be cool. It just should be great wrestlers putting on their, doing their thing. And I'm just like, look, that thing you mentioned there, that example, that analogy. If AEW is what's playing on screen and we've got Cody Rhodes making his triumphant return after a month on the sidelines and he's punching QT Marshall, and you've got Miro slamming Kip Sabian into a garage door, and the main event of the show is Arcade Anarchy featuring Chuck T and Trent hugging each other as Orange Cassidy's there with his hands in his pockets. You look at that and go, okay, like I'm sure some people like that, and they obviously do, but that's not something that I'd happily show people.
Yeah,
is that fair?
Right. Like if I showed up at like my friend's apartment and they're watching AEW Dynamite, I'd be like, yeah, bro, this isn't cool. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, we can't have, like, what are you gonna have girls come over and be like, oh yeah, we're watching Dynamite, we're getting lit. Like, it doesn't have a cool factor.
Those girls should appreciate great in-ring action, Kevin. You should find new friends if they don't appreciate the in-ring action. Damn it. Huh.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh yeah, you caught me, right? Yeah, I should.
Bonafide heat caught in 4K, pal. Damn it.
A bunch of single women in their mid-20s should just love the hell out of QT Marshall versus Cody Rhodes in a bunkhouse match. Like, that's, it's so ridiculous. And it's not just an AEW problem. It's not a Tony Khan problem. But to loop this in and make it all make sense is that you could argue that that's a flaw in Tony Khan's philosophy with wrestling, is that he's not trying to make it cool. He's not trying at all, like, since mid 2020. Because when AEW started, especially when Dynamite started, there was some good entertaining segments. There was some stuff that you could point to and be like, wow, I'm not super embarrassed to watch this. Like when you have these good segments where, like, Kenny Omega is jumping Jon Moxley and they're fighting in the back and Kenny's going through glass, or, you have Jericho making the bad creative line. There's some cool stuff going on. They have a show in Miami out by the water or wherever it was, the Jericho Cruise. Like, that's pretty cool stuff. But now it's just, we're going to cater to the internet fans and that's it. And to pivot here, because we've been doing this one for a while, I want to talk about another flaw. And I think we can't talk about Tony Khan's flaws in philosophy of wrestling without mentioning this. The production of AEW, it's entering abysmal territory. I mean, we've seen, whether it's Jericho getting, doused in orange juice and liquor, and then you have, more recently, the blood and guts where Jericho lands on a mattress comfortably. He takes a nap on a mattress to end this just barbaric blood and guts match.
What did you want? Did you want Jericho to land headfirst on cement and die? What did you want from them, Kevin?
It's so people that say that, it's like, who actually wanted Jericho to land on concrete? That's another story for another day. And then AEW Revolution, where somebody should have told Moxley and Eddie Kingston to get the hell out of the ring. We got a Disney Works fireworks show going off. There's some sparklers in the ring, pal. Just get out of there. We'll take the L. We'll cut the feed. But instead, they don't. And then we get, Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, as Kenny Omega phrased it, 69ing in a ring.
Yeah. Like, even real quick, like, these production errors, even that Revolution ending, you can fix these up quite easily. That Revolution one particularly, real quick, Kenny Omega could walk out as Eddie Kingston's hunched over in the ring, protecting Jon Moxley from the little sparklers going off. Omega comes out, goes, You two idiots, you fell for that. You two look like clowns right now. Everyone's laughing at you. Problem solved. But no, nonetheless, the production when it comes to AEW, obviously Tony Khan is not a seasoned television guy. He's not a seasoned person when it comes to live entertainment, putting on a live show. When something's live, anything can happen. Anything can go wrong. Anything can go right.
He is seasoned. He's used to producing NFL games and football games, and soccer games. But that's a whole, it's not. I know. I just have to say that before people attack us.
He's used to doing the analytics side of NFL and being big on that, and he's used to, I guess, being involved in the management of football teams and that kind of thing. It's not like live TV, especially live wrestling, is a whole different kettle of fish. So when you've got Tony Khan, I mean, in 2019, he was just like learning to do this, stuff in Gorilla and learning to run the shows, and that's cool. But like we're in 2021, Kevin, and the main event of the pay-per-view is ending with a mini sparkler explosion that everyone unanimously laughed at. And then Blood and Guts, their big TV pay-per-view of 2021, ends with Chris Jericho sleeping on a big white mattress. Like, Kevin, that's just not forgivable.
No, it's not. It's not. And it is amateurish. You would never see that in WWE. Like, maybe you could find some stuff from the early 80s or the late 80s that looked this bad, but you'd be challenged to the way they closed that AEW Revolution, the way they closed Revolution 2021. It's like, what in the hell? It's just a fatal flaw that you can't have things like that continue to happen, because then when 3 months down the line, AEW is putting all their eggs in the basket of this big angle that's going to happen at All Out 2021, whatever that big angle is, people are going to be expecting garbage. They're going to be expecting a joke. They're going to be expecting flaws. They're going to be expecting mistakes. They're not going to be expecting or hoping for something great.
That's right. And I mean, just really quickly with the production as well, this is something where WWE, Kevin Dunn and the people who work for him and with him on that production side of things need to get immense credit, because the WWE, regardless of how poor creative has been for like over a decade now, just how bad things have been, no one ever questions the production of WWE. WWE, if anything's overproduced, it looks too good, Right. And that's one of the things which AEW's production is better than TNA and Impact Wrestling were in the past decade. Like TNA, we had boom mics falling into the set and hitting people. AEW is generally decent, but it's AEW's execution and Tony Khan's execution more often than not now of these big angles, which are the ones you talk about, Kevin. These angles which close pay-per-views, which really are the carrying job for storylines. These are the angles which AEW aren't delivering on because production is just not there. They're not executing. And it's sooner rather than later, it's going to become a genuine, real issue for them. And it's going to stop people from watching their product. Why should I keep watching if I'm just going to be disappointed by these angles?
Absolutely. That's a very good point. The next thing that we got to talk about is, the notion, not the notion, but just the simple fact that you could argue that AEW and Tony Khan, they sign people and they don't do anything with them. They signed Christian, they signed Big Show, they signed Sting. And I don't mean people as in people, but they signed these former stars, wrestlers that are still famous, have some name power, for the hell of it. Just because he can, just to flex that he got that sweet, sweet Khan money. He signs Big Show. What has Big Show done? Big Show hasn't been seen on Dynamite in 3 months. Big Show's rotting away doing commentary on YouTube. And then Christian, what is he doing? He's doing backstage segments where Dasha Corrette is asking him about his diet plan and how he tries to be a better wrestler than Kenny Omega. What has Christian Cage done? What has Taz done? I mean, before Team Taz, what was Taz doing? He was doing, brother, this is how you do a suplex, brother. And then he was doing YouTube commentary. What the hell has Sting done since they signed him? He had a good cinematic match. But other than that, he's come out and he's pointed his bat at people and left.
Yeah. I need to build on that. It's not just, obviously the fact that they're signing people and playing up to this whole Tony Khan's toy box theory, that's one thing. And it's just how they use these people. Some of the main examples, Sting, it's genuinely gross to see how they use Sting. Okay, Sting's been used as though no one backstage knows what to do with him, which I struggle to believe considering you've got Jim Ross, Tully, Arn Anderson, Jake Roberts, all these people backstage with seasoned, legendary wrestling minds. None of them can figure out how to use Steve Borden on TV.
Well,
he comes out.
I got to interrupt you for a second. Let's be honest. If Cody Rhodes wasn't an EVP, none of those guys you just mentioned would have anything to do with the company. You think the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega is going to bring in freaking Arn Anderson and Jake Roberts and listen to them? No. They think they're better than anything. They think they're better than those guys ever were, Well, yeah, because Kenny Omega and the Bucks execute fake moves better, Kevin. Yep.
Do I need to say anything more? I mean, this kind of also ties back, kind of sidetracking away from the signing wrestlers thing for a little moment. This is the other thing, because Tony Khan is so empowering of the wrestlers, lets the inmates run the asylum to an extent, is so pro-wrestler, for the wrestler. The negative of that is these wrestlers nowadays who have the entitlement and have that, I'm better than these legends. I'm not going to listen to these legends. I have a group of stans on Twitter who say I'm really good and I deserve better. That's all I need to hear. Hey, Tony, push me. I deserve this. And Tony Khan just keeps signing people who are like this. Most of this AEW roster has either that mentality of I deserve better or similar kind of mentality. Very few people on this roster have the old school mentality of I'm grateful to be on TV. I'm listening to these legends' feedback. I want to become a better version of myself. More often than not, it's I'm great as I am. Push me. I deserve this. And having so many of those people on the roster, Kevin, it's not the best way to be.
No, I not at all. And yeah, I mean that's part of it too. It's like Tony Khan, he brings in these people, and he's like, oh, he's like, oh, you guys are great. You guys are having great matches on Dark. We're gonna push you. And I don't know, the whole Dark. We could talk about AEW Dark maybe as its own segment if you want. But what does AEW Dark and Dark Revelation? What does that really do for the company? Because 100,000 people watch that show, and then the other 600,000 people are like, what the hell is going on? Who is this guy? Who is so and so? Who is Anthony Ogogo? Why should I care about him? Because he had an AEW Dark match 6 months ago. Now all of a sudden he's facing Martin Luther Cody. Why? Why do I care?
Well, trying to be as objective as I can. The main reason for AEW Dark, there's two things. For one, give people opportunities, because 2 hours on AEW Dynamite, you can't showcase everyone. Obviously. And then the other one is give everyone and their mother who's actively signed by AEW just wins, so that when they show up on AEW Dynamite, AEW can be like, oh my God, SCU is 8-0 in 2021. And I'm thinking to myself, I haven't seen them win one match on Dynamite. Why are they 8-0? Who have they beaten? And they've beaten a bunch of these random teams from MZQ Pro Wrestling in Jacksonville. And it's like, well, what is this? So that's kind of why. I disagree with the latter. The first reason that there's not enough TV time on Dynamite, obviously, Kevin, we're not idiots. Obviously, there needs to be an extra show for that. But just how AEW go about it with Dark, Kevin, it's not it.
To have two extra shows, though? We really need 2 YouTube shows on Monday and Tuesday? It's a bit much. It's a lot. I just don't... There's not a lot of people out there that can watch it. I can't. I couldn't sit around at 6 o'clock at night on a Monday night and watch AEW Dark Revelation. I just don't have time.
But there are those people, right? There are those people who feel so a part of AEW because of the reasons we mentioned before, that Tony Khan listens to them and empowers them, and that AEW is one of the few things they have to really grasp onto in life generally. And as a result, they'll happily dedicate an evening to sitting down for an hour and 45 minutes and watching AEW Dark Elevation. And they'll sit down on Tuesday and watch 2 hours of AEW Dark. And then they'll sit down on Wednesday and watch 2 hours of AEW Dynamite. They'll watch the Road to AEW Dynamite specials on the YouTube channel, where you've got Matt Jackson talking about his 32-year love story with Christopher Daniels. And then these are the people who will watch the Dynamite Friday night special when it comes out next year and whatnot. That's the audience they cater to. So
right.
As much as
I would watch, I would watch instead of an hour and a half or 2 hours of AEW Revelation on YouTube, I'd watch a 30-minute comedy show or a 30-minute talk show or Britt Baker, for example, is hosting the show, and she's bringing on people like Anthony Ogogo or like the Hybrid 2, or somebody that like we don't know a lot about, and trying to develop and get personality out of them. I'd watch that. Develop the personality aspect. All these wrestlers that you have on the roster, all whatever it is, 80, 100, however many they have, they're all already good wrestlers. They don't need more reps in the ring on Monday and Tuesday. Why not do something funny or do something, maybe a drama, like, I don't know, something, you know what I mean? Like something where there's a focus on entertainment and developing characters.
Well, I think that's a great segue into kind of the next point. So, Kevin, I'll throw this on to you when it comes to AEW and their TV deal, TBS. I guess talk to us about that, and then we'll go from there, I think.
Okay, so basically what happens is, starting in 2022, AEW Dynamite will no longer be on TNT. It's going to be switching over to TBS. And this is what it is, but TBS is the secondary network to TNT. So I don't know if that's a great thing. I don't know if this is a plan to revamp TBS, where Warner Media is looking at this like, okay, AEW is one of, if not our biggest asset. We're going to put it on TBS, and we're going to try to develop TBS. We're going to try to bring that up to speed with TNT. Because everybody knows TNT. You've got some good drama shows on there. You have the NBA. You have the NBA playoffs on there. You have Shaq and Charles Barkley. TNT is where to go versus TBS. On TBS, you have, Saturday afternoon baseball. You got some old comedy shows from the 90s. Like, it's a channel of reruns. So you bring AEW there. Is that the idea? Elevate AEW? Or is it Warner Media looking at it like, well, we just got the NHL. We're going to put the NHL on TNT because we want to have real sports. And we're going to relegate this wrestling thing over to TBS, the secondary network, until the deal expires with AEW, and then we're going to get rid of them. Like, who knows? Who knows how this is going to play out? It could play out either way. It could just be as simple as, well, we have the NHL, we have to move AEW. Sorry, and we're going to keep AEW, and we're just going to put them on TBS, and hope those 700,000 people watch AEW every week on a different channel.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and something that in the next year to come, it's going to be a big watch this space with AEW. Because when the news came out that, AEW were moving to TBS for this, my reaction was, is this the negative, cynical reaction? I don't know. My reaction was, isn't this what happened to Impact Wrestling and TNA?
Yeah.
Where you just gradually get bumped down the networks. You go from TNT, like the major, like a very major network in the United States and North America, and then you go to TBS, and then what? HBO or what? Not HBO, just any one of these like random networks like below TBS. Like, is that AEW's trajectory? And really, I think I want to bring this up with you now, Kevin. We've kind of talked about this off Elite Heat, and I think you're a big, conveyor of this, and you can speak to this really well. I'll throw to you in a moment. Wrestling TV as a whole, like, do you think something needs to change with it? Like, do you think the format of just AEW with like a lot of matches for the sake of it and empowering the wrestlers just in the ring? I mean, you mentioned like wrestler talk shows and options. Do you think we need to see more of that, like, just generally? Like,
yes, I think something needs to change. Like, why in the hell does Britt Baker not have a sitcom on YouTube, a 20-minute sitcom? She's just like having different wrestlers on, making jokes, and we're seeing a different side of wrestlers. She's so damn entertaining. Why is that not a thing? Why can't we get Chris Jericho doing like a live Talk is Jericho, a live stream on YouTube? Like, why can't we get stuff like that? Why are we getting like Tony Khan sitting in a room with Tony Schiavone and Aubrey Edwards answering questions about the next 6 months of AEW dark booking on an episode, on his like 5th appearance on the AEW podcast, But yeah, like wrestling as a whole, I think from a TV perspective, yeah, I think it definitely needs to change. And I think it's like almost criminal at this point that no wrestling company, whether it's WWE, AEW, New Japan, Impact, just some of the bigger names, or a unknown indie company or a wrestling company that hasn't even been thought of, it doesn't exist yet. Why has nobody tried to get into the streaming market? And yes, I know WWE has their library on Peacock in the United States, but that's not what I mean. Good for them. But, why is there not like a seasonal wrestling product that is exclusive on Netflix that is developing seasons of wrestling, a different look at wrestling, kind of like what Lucha Underground tried to do, more cinematic, more dark, different, something outside of the box. Like, why is there not a 13 episode season on Netflix with good wrestling, good stories, and then it culminates in a big special, a like 3-hour exclusive Netflix special, like a pay-per-view almost? Why is that not a thing yet? I don't know. It's just the way that content and entertainment has changed, the way we consume it. You can watch literally anything with the push of a button on your phone. But wrestling is still like stuck in the late 90s. It's stuck in this live TV model that it's proven that it doesn't work. Ratings are down all across sports. Football, basketball, soccer, baseball, hockey, everything is down across the board in ratings because people can go on an app and they can watch highlights instantaneously as they happen. Somebody hits a home run. Mike Trout hits a home run. It's going to be on Twitter within a minute of it happening. You know, there's no need to sit and watch a baseball game for 3.5 hours on a Monday night when you can see all the highlights. I don't know. I just think something needs to change with the way the wrestling model is consumed.
Oh, definitely. And it's not exactly like a Tony Khan exclusive problem. It's a wrestling problem. And because Tony Khan is literally the guy who operates the second biggest company in wrestling, he's a big part of this. How wrestling is portrayed, how wrestling is seen, how wrestling is produced, how it's consumed. These are the things which Tony Khan, I mean, we mentioned the word revolutionary earlier in this video. I think he could be the guy who does this. He could well and truly, with the financial backing they have, with the TBS, TNT stuff, with all these deals they can make with the personnel they have, Tony Khan could be the guy who takes pro wrestling out of this tired, stale format it's in to something fresh. You mentioned a Britt Baker sitcom there. That'd be fantastic. Why is the only real, I guess, character development, get to know the wrestler show we get is AEW Unrestricted on their YouTube channel, and that gets literally like 8,000 views most episodes, unless like Sting's on there. And why do we get, I mean, if you want to watch Being the Elite, I mean, I guess that's something, but I mean, is that it? Like wrestling needs to change away from where it's at. Kevin, we're in the TikTok generation. People's attention spans are shorter than they've ever been. That is basically a fact. Okay, attention spans never been that long, so you always want to have a show that's going to keep you actively engaged. A wrestling show that's structured the way Tony Khan's AEW Dynamite, AEW Dark Elevations are structured, not it. Okay, when it's 2 hours of let's look at grown men in their underwear perfectly executing moves that everyone knows aren't like real for the most part. It just, there's not enough of an audience for that. It's stale. It's tired. There needs to be a revolution in that regard. There needs to be a way for pro wrestling to take a step forward. Whether that's a Lucha Underground style, whether it's not, whatever the way forward is, something needs to happen. And Tony Khan, Kevin, realistically, he should and could and should well be at the forefront of that.
Absolutely. And I got to pivot back to the TV deal for a second. Now, do you think that the executives at Warner Media were looking at AEW and they were like, this is not what we signed up for? And that's why they moved to TBS? Because, like, realistically, they probably thought, okay, we screwed up with WCW the first time around. We have another opportunity, again, to have this wrestling company. We're going to give it a platform, and we're going to try to grow our brand, and we're going to have this wrestling company succeed, bring in millions and millions of dollars, and we're going to have these superstars, whatnot. And then what these guys at Warner, these executives, they're seeing, okay, Sting came out, he pointed a bat at somebody again. Oh, Chris Jericho is getting doused with orange juice by like a high school kid. I don't know if, like, do you think that the people at Warner feel like they got sold a bit of goods?
I mean, yeah, I think on paper in 2018 and 2019, when you've got Tony Khan, you've got the Elite, you've got all these people like the Khan family pitching this to these executives, these suits and ties, I think AEW on paper around its inception would have sounded fantastic for a TV deal. It's an alternative to WWE. It's bringing wrestling back to TNT. This is going to be, we're going to take the things WCW never did. We're going to do it 20 years later on TNT, all elite wrestling. We're going to have Chris Jericho. We're going to have all these big notable name stars in wrestling. We've got the backing of the Khan family. I think the actual pitch of AEW would have sounded fantastic. And when the deal was signed, these executives probably thought it was like really good. But as you allude to there, when AEW hit the pandemic and really after that, a lot of the decisions, it went from a show that was written to at least try and be somewhat cool with Jericho Moxley, with Jericho and Cody Rhodes and the Inner Circle punching the Elite and the Stadium Stampede stuff and everything. MJF cutting, brazenly arrogant promos, dissing neckbeard fans in the crowd, touring schedules, a couple thousand people at every AEW show. That was great. But the direction, and to answer your question there, were they sold false goods almost, and is that a factor in leading AEW to where it is now? Honestly, yeah. If these executives were sold, we're literally going to put a bunch of random matches with people who no one's ever heard of. We're going to put being the Elite on mainstream TV. We're going to have our world champion be some guy who's going to 69 a 65-year-old international businessman in the middle of the ring. And like, if they were told that 3 years ago, I don't think I would have signed the contract, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, if you can't already get it, we're saying the move to TBS is a bad thing for AEW. It's not something that anybody should be celebrating. There's no way to flip it into a good thing unless, like I said, Warner Media's plan is to make TBS a good to great network again and, rise it from irrelevancy with AEW at the headline of that. Unless that's the case, the move to TBS for AEW Dynamite is not a good thing at all. Warner Media signed the NHL and they threw AEW out, basically. Like, that's pretty much what happened. That's the way to look at it. We're not trying to be negative. We're not insulting your favorite wrestling promotion. We're not looking, we're not looking at it with rose-colored glasses. We're not going to try to flip the narrative here. It's a bad thing that they got moved to TBS. Yeah, because you've got television as it is a dying platform. Streaming, social media, that's the future. We've talked about this in a number of different videos and podcasts. That's where it's at. And AEW, even in that world of TV dying, they've been kicked off a network. Basically. I mean, that's what's happened. And they've been relegated down to TBS. And like, I don't know, obviously that people are going to still support them. People are going to still support, obviously. People are still going to watch them regardless of what network it's on. Awesome, amazing. But the fact of the matter is they went from TNT to TBS. And is that great for Tony Khan's promotion? Is that something that they really should be proud of? Like, put it this way. During March Madness, TBS gets the games that the college basketball games that nobody wants to watch. All the good games, they go on True TV or CBS or TNT, I think. But they put the games that nobody wants to watch, like the random games with no implications, go on TBS. And yeah, there's just nothing there on TBS. I don't know. It's not a good thing. It's not good at all. Yeah, for sure. So I think with that being said, I think we can kind of transition away from that a bit. One thing I want to talk about, I've kind of mentioned it a bit here, but I think I want to get your thoughts on this. Do you think Tony Khan has too much of not a fascination with, an obsession with, but too much of a kind of dependence upon, I'll call it a Dave Meltzer style of wrestling show? And by that, what I mean is matches first. The in-ring is what matters. We're not going to put as much emphasis upon the entertainment side of things. Kevin, do you think Tony Khan has too much of that mentality in his booking? Yeah. Simple answer, yeah. I think he cares about what Dave Meltzer brings to the table. I think realistically, Tony Khan at 10 years old in 1992 was reading the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And now he's in a position where, he's read these negative narratives from Dave Meltzer, because Dave Meltzer was doing it long before it was cool. Dave Meltzer was burying and bashing every single thing that WWE did in the late 80s, mid 80s, late 70s, however long he's been writing. Through the 90s, through the Attitude Era, he was bashing just about everything. So now Tony Khan is like, oh, wow, I could change this. I could be the company that gets praised in the dirt sheets. I could be the company that everyone writes good things about. I could be this. I could be that. And it shows in his booking style. It really does. It's like
I will never forget when Britt Baker had that genuinely really good match with Thunder Rosa, and like Britt Baker was like bleeding that match, the unsanctioned one, and like the clip of Tony Khan saying, "Oh, like, that's gonna be nominated for Show of the Year. That match is gonna be up there in the awards." And Britt Baker's like, I really hope Dave Meltzer like that. Like stuff like that goes to show you the mentality that stems from the top. And in this case, that mentality comes from Tony Khan. Khan was that guy who probably most likely had a notepad and he'd watch WWF in your house, whatever, and he'd write down his star ratings for the shows. Then when he gets the Wrestling Observer newsletter and a week from then, he'd compare his ratings to Meltzer's. And Tony Khan, he's been, said, this has been said by AW personnel and people who really know Tony Khan. The man's like a wrestling encyclopedia. He knows literally everything about each wrestler's match log, who wrestled where, who's had programs with who, what company did this match when and where this happened and what storyline. Like Tony Khan is that guy. Tony Khan, in that regard, him and Meltzer get on amazingly. These two guys are on Wrestling Observer having literal phone calls way too often, I'd say. So they get on really well. Obviously, Tony Khan, because of that, I guess, tries to cater to Meltzer, cater to that style. Is that good for AEW? Has that been something that's been a big factor in AEW being moved from TNT to TBS? I mean, I think so, Kevin. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean that's part of it. When you're catering and you're writing and you're booking a style of wrestling promotion, wrestling product that is catered toward the Dave Meltzers of the world, that product is not going to be cool enough to stay on a mainstream network, on a mainstay television network. It's just not going to be cool enough. Imagine if Vince McMahon wrote the shows to appease Dave Meltzer. Imagine that. Like in 1991, Vince McMahon was like, "Oh, we're not going to do Hulk Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter in the main event of WrestleMania at 7? We're going to do Rick Martel versus Ricky Steamboat in the main event because that's what Meltzer wants. That'll be a great match." There would be no WrestleMania.
Yeah. WWE's done that since really since Neville, Sami Zayn, Tyler Breeze, since that NXT crop in 2014 and the NXT takeovers became a thing, WWE's been involving that in their product. And ratings have gone from 5 million viewers down to 1.5 on Monday nights in 5 years. And that's been a big factor in it. It's been proven over time that is not what gets TV ratings. And in wrestling, especially nowadays, TV ratings is one of the biggest metrics that's used to measure, I guess, success. Whether it should be or it shouldn't be, that's a whole separate video in itself. But the fact of the matter is, the ratings are not helped by the style of booking that Tony Khan uses and prides himself upon. And really, for the past year, Kevin, ever since about Double or Nothing 2020 thereabouts, AEW's style of booking has gone from, obviously there's that wrestling emphasis, but having cool characters, cool angles, cool storylines, cool moments, to now it's just more so the quote unquote cool moments involving like the world champion. In this case nowadays, Kevin, is Kenny Omega taking off Orange Cassidy's sunglasses, putting the sunglasses on himself, and then saying that 3 years ago he was the cleaner. That's legit. I'm dead serious. That happened 3 weeks ago. And that's the kind of edgy, long-term storytelling that AEW is using to bridge the gap between announcing a match and doing a match. Because the matches will be good because that's what Tony Khan likes to do. That's what Dave Meltzer wants. But beyond that, Kevin, what's that going to do for ratings? What's that going to do for interest? What's that going to do outside of appeasing the very niche, small target demographic of AEW? And the fact of the matter is...
And to bring this point home, so we're not just a couple assholes burying AEW and Tony Khan, I have to pose this perspective for all of you listening. What made most of us fall in love with wrestling, what made the general public fall in love with wrestling back in the mid 80s with Hulk Hogan, and then again in the late 90s with Stone Cold Steve Austin, when wrestling was at its biggest, it was the characters, the memorable moments, and there was less of a focus on matches. Nobody remembers when Ricky Steamboat did a great arm drag to, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. But everyone remembers when Hulk Hogan was carrying Miss Elizabeth to the back and Macho Man was seething mad, thinking that Hulk Hogan was trying to make a play at his wife. Everybody remembers when Jake the Snake Roberts' snake bit Macho Man. Everyone remembers when Stone Cold did the beer bath thing. That's what made wrestling great. And how many of those moments have we seen in AEW? Not a lot. You know, moments that were supposed to be that way. The mimosa match with Jericho and Orange Cassidy. It's just a 49-year-old man taking a bath in vodka and vodka and orange juice. And the exploding death match. It was supposed to be one of those moments. Oh my God, I'm going to tell my kids about this moment. What was it? Two grown men 69ing while Disney World fireworks go off. Again, blood and guts. Chris Jericho, he falls into a mattress. Like, where are these moments? Are there any big moments? Can you think of any?
That's I know we're like co-hosts with this, and they're not trying to push a narrative. But that's a damn good point when it comes to like what are the moments. Because my God, Kevin, I'll answer your question in a moment. But I random YouTube videos come across my recommended, being like, I miss wrestling. What happened to wrestling? And it's like two 28-year-old men or like a 36-year-old man going, man, I remember back in the day watching. The Undertaker crucifying someone on Raw, the beer truck, Austin hitting McMahon with a bedpan, like all these moments. You mentioned Hogan and Elizabeth there, like all this stuff. When it comes to AEW, those moments, where were they? Like in the early days of Dynamite, AEW were trying to make them. Like straight up, Jericho, a stupid idea from bad creative. Jericho and the Inner Circle having their skybox raided by the Elite, and there's like glass being smashed, and they're in the concourse brawling, and moments like that. Moxley DDTing Omega through the coffee table in the first Dynamite. That's stuff you're probably going to remember. Is it all-time legendary pro wrestling angles? Not really. And matter of fact, Kevin, it's funny you mention one of those AEW moments, because more often than not, AEW's just gone with a WWE famous moment, like Mike Tyson being in a brawl with the face of the company, or, like these happen all the time now. It's just these WWE rip-off ones, like Sammy Guevara spraying bubbly onto the Pinnacle. Like these type of moments, it's just take WWE, take a legendary moment from them and just rip it off with wrestlers who are nowhere near as interesting. Because AEW, Kevin, I can't think of what, like, in the past, year, a moment that genuinely stands out. Can you?
Right. You have, Jericho and Tyson. I almost forgot about that, so you brought it up. It happened, and then what? Nothing. So, yeah, and then we've already seen it with Austin Tyson. We've seen it. We've seen
that. Saw that 23 years ago.
Yeah.
And, one of the only moments I remember from the past year of AEW, the moments that I genuinely remember of good. I remember Brody Lee destroying Cody and winning the TNT title. Is Omega winning the world title after a screw job with Don Callis in a messy finish? Is that really a legendary moment that you can tell your kids about?
Is that an all-time great moment that when you're telling your grandkids about this company called All Elite Wrestling, you're going to mention that? You're going to be like, oh yeah, Kenny Omega won the title after, Don Callis got tricked Dean Ambrose into elbowing him in the face. Yeah. Yeah,
so let's be objective. Sting's debut, I think that's probably the best thing. But, you look at what's happened since then. December 2nd, 2020, winter's coming, Sting debuts. It's Sting! Oh, my God, what a moment. Oh, my God, Sting's in AEW. Awesome. Genuinely cool.
Wait, let me say this. What was Sting's debut? Let me play devil's advocate. What was Sting's debut? It snowed in Florida. Oh, wow. They had fake snow for Sting's debut. And then you had Tony Schiavone screaming, "It's Sting." We've seen it already in WCW. We've seen that 100 million times.
Exactly. It's just, Kevin, I don't know.
Lack of originality is what I think we should phrase it as. There's not much originality with AEW. Their wrestling style is mimicked from New Japan, pretty much, and Mexican lucha libre.
Yep.
Their character development, their promos, their best promos is guys ripping off WWE or making fun of WWE. So
yes, correct. Yep. And it's just segments. usually the best segments are just ones we've already seen. And then, look, Kevin, I think this stems from the EVPs as well. Because the Young Bucks, their characters are that they're parodies of wrestlers.
They're from Rancho Cucamonga.
Yeah. And that's Tony Khan's promotion.
Yeah.
You know, that's AEW.
Yeah.
That's parodies. It's a style of wrestling.
Well, that's what brought them to the dance, was doing parodies. That's what brought the Elite fame, was, you know, when they started parodying the NWO and doing the Too Sweet and the Suck It, and you had Cody making fun of WWE and Ring of Honor doing these promos where he's like, oh, you know, you're gonna go develop your skills with Hunter or something like that. You know, he's cutting these edgy, quote unquote, edgy promos. Like that's what brought them to the dance.
Kevin. So with that said, this not just about the Young Bucks, just generally with like the Elite and just like not really Tony Khan, but would you say the term "fake it till you make it" applies? And now that they made it to a mainstream TNT 2-hour live wrestling show every week, now that they made it to the big time, do you feel like they've kind of been exposed? The EVPs?
Big time. Oh, the EVPs? Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah, I mean, Kenny Omega talked this big game about, oh, you know, we're going to have the best women's division. And we see how that's gone. The Young Bucks talked this big game that tag team wrestling was going to be more important than ever. We've seen how that's gone. Cody Rhodes said every single match was going to matter. Every storyline was going to matter. Wins and losses were going to matter. And yeah, we've seen how that's gone too.
Yeah. Like, I honestly think that's kind of a bit of that's a lot of AEW's identity. Like trying to look at their promotion in such like an objective like lens. Like this isn't just us saying, "Oh, AEW suck. I hate AEW." Indie jobber. Like that's not. Well, we're running this down as a bio of Tony Khan, looking at his promotion, what's happened to it, the
right.
3 years since it became announced. Trying to look at this as objectively as possible, like why the ratings can't stay above 1 million viewers for longer than 2 weeks in a row, why their audience isn't growing, what's happening. Like we're trying to look at this objectively, Kevin. And I think the whole thing.
Let's tie back the EVP's point to Tony Khan. Tony Khan is the guy that appointed 4 full-time active wrestlers as EVPs of his company. And not only does he expect them to be full-time wrestlers, he expects them to run the show at the same time. Is he right or wrong for doing that in your mind?
Look, I think the premise of that isn't like when you lay it out that way, that's not a good thing. I think on paper, like when they announced it in AEW in their first year, I think it was fine. Like, yeah, obviously there were detractors who right from the jump called that out and were like, what, you're having 4 active full-time pro wrestlers with natural egos, who want to be the best themselves as the guys who are both wrestling and behind the scenes heavily signing people, promoting, etc. And Tony Khan's empowering that. I think at the time that was like, okay, but really as the promotion's gone on, like one of the things, Kevin, a real recent example, Cody Rhodes having legitimate real life heat with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, and Cody and the Bucks and Omega aren't staying on the same page. Like that was always going to happen. It always was. Like, what do you think of that specifically?
Right. And I'll say this too real quick. The other side of the coin, you can hate on Khan for giving those guys EVP positions. But the other side of the coin is that WWE was apparently offering all 4 of those guys huge money. And he had to do something to get them to sign with him, Khan being. Because, like, let's say he doesn't offer Kenny Omega an EVP position. He's just like, yeah, bro, I want you to come in, be the face of this company, be a great wrestler. Well, then he's like, all right, I'm going to go make $10 million working for Vince, and I'll be on main event. You know, I'll work like 1 day a week, and I'll eat catering with my friends, and I'll make $10 million, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, let me get back to the point that you made.
Yeah.
So recap it again. Pose it to me again.
Essentially, yeah, like Cody Rhodes having real life heat with
yes.
and the Bucks, and people also as well, journalists, wrestling journalists, reportedly being too afraid to report it. If you want to mention that as well, but yeah,
right. So you got Cody and are we surprised that Cody has real life heat? Like, we're gonna sit here and try to pretend like we're shocked that these guys have heat. It's not just a Cody thing, but you put 4 guys with egos like these 4 guys have. The Young Bucks, they can make fun of everyone, but no one can make fun of them. Kenny Omega, in his bio, he says he's the best bout machine. And then Cody Rhodes is the son of Dusty Rhodes, and he's been told all his life how great he is. So are we shocked here that these 4 guys can't function together? No. You can clearly tell who is booking what within the company. You can clearly tell what Cody's booking, because he's out there doing it himself. You can tell what the Bucks are booking. You can tell what Kenny's booking. And these guys are running the company. They're literally involved in every big segment. And yeah, I mean, they have heat. It is what it is. And will they figure it out? Maybe. Because it's a whole different ball game when you're working for Ring of Honor and you're showing up to work and you're wrestling a good match. And then you're going back on the road and you're going to like Waffle House and you're hanging out. And you're like, yo, what if we were in charge? And you're doing all this fantasy booking, having these great conversations. So it's one thing to be doing that and then showing up and you're wrestling for someone else's company. It's another thing to be doing it for your own company. It's a completely other thing when hey, what if we were in charge of Ring of Honor? When that becomes reality and you are in charge of your company, that changes the game entirely. And we've seen it. And what's going to happen here? Is there going to be a fallout? Realistically, there's 2 more years left on all these guys' contracts. They all signed apparently 5-year deals with AEW. What's to say that Kenny Omega's not like, screw it, I'll go wrestle Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 41. I'll get paid $8 million to do that. Screw it, I don't need this. Or what's to say the Young Bucks will be like, all right, yeah, we'll go to WWE. We'll wrestle the Usos in the New Day for a few $1 million. But what's to say that's not possible?
Well, Kevin, I'll ask you this to kind of supplement all of that. Where do you see AEW in 2024?
Wow. I mean,
because 2023, that's the year, like TNT extended them through 2023. So, and also these guys, the contracts, as you mentioned, they're 5-year deals. So they're going to be there till 2023, obviously. So we're going to have the remainder of 2021, 2022, and 2023 with AEW either as it's presently constructed or fairly similar. After that, who knows, honestly.
Well, realistically... go ahead.
Yeah. No, you go. You go.
Yeah, realistically, you got Warner Media. Are they going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for AEW to be on their secondary network? That's not going to be a thing. If their plan is not to build TBS and make it a premier network on TV, and they're just throwing AEW there because they don't know where else to put them, they're not going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for that. So realistically, what's going to happen with AEW? Like, is Tony Khan going to be like, all right, bro, let's go on Access TV, or let's go on some channel that nobody watches. It's like a hunting network or something. Like, no, they're gonna cut their losses. He's gonna go back to running the NFL. He's gonna say, you know what? I lived my dream. I was able to say that I ran a wrestling promotion. I've been there, done that. Now I'm gonna go back to working for the Jaguars.
Exactly, because the Khan family have that much money that they can do that. Like, I don't know the exact finances of how much exact money the Khan family has versus like Dixie Carter and her parents and all that kind of stuff. But it seems as if the Khan family and Tony Khan and all this would be a bit more willing to cut the losses and just go back to running Fulham FC, Jacksonville Jaguars, probably invest in another business, buy something else, like keep making business moves, as opposed to Tony Khan grasping onto AEW through 2024, 25, 26, 27, as their audience just dwindles and dwindles away, and they go on these like random like 4th tier American TV networks.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like I could see, like I said, I could see people being so sick of Cody's BS that they're just going to leave. The Young Bucks just be like, I'm tired of this guy. Let's get out of here. Let's go make some money while we can, because AEW is a sinking ship. And
yeah, like Cody, sorry to cut you off. Cody goes to run for mayor of Atlanta or mayor of Georgia, and you've got the Young Bucks, Young Bucks and Kenny go to WWE, and Kenny Omega maybe gets like an AJ Styles push as Omega's like 41 by this point, and you got the Young Bucks having a couple of dream matches against the Usos, and the rest of these AEW guys. Sting retires, and Darby Allin goes to have great Puro matches in Japan where he's breaking his neck every week. Like, that's a genuine possibility to get going.
Exactly. And what's the Elite's reaction? What's Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks reaction as Cody Rhodes is cutting this promo where he's acting like he's the only person in the history of the world to have a half black, half white child? Like, what are they sitting there thinking? What is, like, you got Kenny Omega, he's sitting next to like Michael Nakazawa and Tony Khan. What the hell are those guys thinking as Cody is cutting this promo on live TV in front of 750,000 people on live TV and 700 people in attendance? Well, what are these people? What are they thinking? You know?
Yeah, it's beyond me. Like, I mean, I think we need to do a bio on Cody Rhodes in pretty soon. But just to really quickly sum up, you've got a guy who grew up with Ric Flair, like, you know, sleeping in his guest room with random females from the nightclub, like most nights. You have Arn Anderson and Tully walking around with Dusty, having like big dinners where they're eating these buffets. And you've got you're probably steroids around the house, supposedly. You got Cody Rhodes. He's growing up as some just privileged American white boy watching all this happen. And this is the guy who's trying to cut Hard Times promos about the state of racism in 2021 on Dynamite. He's like crying. Like this is one of the guys who Tony Khan has given the position to. It's like, is this what AW needed? Was Cody Rhodes the guy who AW needed to make an EVP? Like you mentioned, you know, so that Cody didn't sign WWE, he gave him that EVP spot. And it's like, is that going to end up biting Tony Khan in the backside, so to speak? That's going to end up being one of the main kind of downfalls in the company. Like, it waits to be seen. We don't know. Maybe in 5 years' time, Kevin, AW is ahead of WWE in all metrics. Maybe. But with everything and the direction it's trending, and I don't know. It's such
what is Tony Khan thinking? What is Tony Khan thinking as Cody's cutting this promo? Like, you picture Tony Khan, he's on the phone with like some NFL player negotiating a massive contract for him to sign with the Jaguars, like 20 minutes before AEW goes on the air. He's late to the show. He goes to sit down next to the Young Bucks, and the first thing he sees is Cody talking about racism in America. And he's like, what the hell? You know, what the hell is going on in my company?
Yeah, look, I don't even know. I guess from everything we've seen of Tony Khan, he'd probably Cody would come backstage after that, and Khan would probably pat him on the back and be like, that was an amazing promo. That reminded me of that Hard Times promo your father cut, and Cody would probably be sitting there like chuffed. He'd be like emotional. And then he'd probably go on Twitter and see everyone hating it and probably think otherwise. But no, I don't even know. And also, one thing, unless there's anything else you want to say about this, one thing I want to move on to is just Tony Khan on screen. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about Tony Khan as the on-screen actor and the on-screen TV personality, or do you want to keep talking about Cody?
No. I was trying to tie that back to Tony Khan because we went on a Cody tangent. But yeah, we're going to do a Cody bio. I know you guys want to hear that. It's just, now's the right time to do a Cody bio if there ever was one. But with Tony Khan, the on-screen character, God, I mean, we've seen it a couple times on Dark where he's like stuttering, trying to make matches. He looks very uncomfortable. You can tell he's clearly out of his element. He's super nervous. And then there's the promos he does on Impact where he's like, I could buy this company. Haha. And Tony Schiavone's like in a New Year's hat. And like, this is what we have going on. And everybody's freaking out like, oh my God, Tony Khan is the man. Oh my God, look at this promo. And it's like, we already know, everyone watching knows that Tony Khan can buy Impact. Does that make him Vince McMahon in 1997 after he did the Brett Screwed Brett promo? Is that what Tony Khan is trying to make himself? This evil, villainous billionaire heel by saying, oh, I could buy Impact, pal. Like, bro, like, I don't know. It just, he comes off like a nerd. You know, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but that's just what he comes off as. And it's not really entertaining. There's nothing wrong with being a nerd. It's fine, but it's not really entertaining.
It's just him being put on TV, which is such a dumb thing to say at face value, but it's a guy who's grown up just idolizing wrestling and loving professional wrestling, being put on camera and being on the other side of things, and he's just, it doesn't click. It's not him. Maybe after a bunch of practice, he'll improve a little. But Tony Khan, he's not a natural on-camera guy. And people, it's like, there are people, some people, and generally speaking, a lot of people who aren't, don't want to be doing public speaking, aren't the people who love doing on-camera stuff, especially on like a TV show. That's not made for everyone. Tony Khan's clearly not made for that, especially on like a live show. Like those AW and Impact Wrestling taped vignette videos, like Tony Khan isn't like stuttering as much. He's like less kind of like nervous, probably because there's been a few pre-takes. But even then, it's just how he comes off. It's like this. It's like a giddy excitement and like nervousness. And it's just like, well, it's like, oh, well, I have money. Shivani, what do you think? Like, I don't know. Because like Vince McMahon had this arrogance of like, I'm more jacked than you. I'm more rich than you. I'm better than you. And like, it felt like a really good, arrogant, natural, cocky heel. But Tony Khan just seems like a giddy guy who's always wanted to be on a wrestling TV show. Now he is. And it doesn't click with him. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's like he doesn't know how to act. Kind of. It's like you give a kid a bunch of cookies and they're just like, that's never had cookies before. And they just go crazy and start eating like 100 packs of cookies.
9 days from tonight. Matt Snyder, 9 days from tonight. You get your match 9 days from tonight. 9 days. It's like, this is giving me the promo that you associate with Tony Khan. Like, if Tony Khan never becomes like an on-screen figure and AEW, heaven forbid, goes out of business at the end of their TNT deal in 2023 and they cut their losses, the promo I'm going to look back upon, and everyone's going to look back upon with Tony Khan, is him on AEW Dark stuttering through a promo setting up Matt Sydal versus Kenny Omega in 9 days from tonight.
And it's it's only a matter of time before he's a TV character. I can see it now. The first Dynamite with a full crowd in attendance. Tony Khan's going to come out, pat himself on the back, and boom. We're going to get Tony Khan as a character, pal.
We're going to get Tony Khan and every AEW personnel on the stage, and they're going to try and do what they did at WrestleMania 37 with Vince and the WWE roster. And you'll have Tony Khan being like, he'd be like legitimately like crying. He'd be like stammering or stuttering through the promo, being like, I'm so happy, guys. Thank you for supporting AEW. You make this possible. And he'd be like crying, and all these like, the beards at whichever arena they're at will be like clapping, like, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. And he'd be like crying. It'd be like this like dynamite AEW moment. Everyone will look back upon with reverence. And it's like, okay, another WWE parody. What can you do? Basically,
that's what we're gonna get. And I mean, is it unfortunate? No, but that's just the reality of the situation. And then he's gonna be out. He's gonna come out every week following this Dynamite and just be like, "All right, guys, have a great match card for you." And yeah, we're gonna get more Tony Khan on camera. I can see it. I could just see it.
Well, Kevin, I want to tie this back to the conversation we were having before about like just the wrestling business as a whole, like this, like how wrestling is presented and whatnot. I think based on what we've talked about, would you say, I think it's fair to say that with wrestling as we know it, this whole, here's a 2-hour weekly show, we're going to have our pay-per-view in 3 weeks from now, this whole model we've been doing for years. Do you think it's fair to say that WWE have done everything that could possibly have been done in that model as far as angles, storylines? WWE's done it all. So, like, what does AEW really have left to do that's unique and different that's worth doing? And as a result, Kevin, before you go, do you think that should, do you think because of that, AEW really should more so invest in trying to revolutionize wrestling before, God forbid, they go out of business, maybe?
Yeah, I think they should. I mean, if you're asking me what AEW can improve on, yeah, there's a ton of things. And we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I think to answer your question, I think WWE pretty much has done just about everything. And I think that's evident because some of AEW's most memorable segments, like we said already, are rip-off of WWE. And it just is what it is. It's not a knock. We're not hating. That's literally what happened. They ripped off these segments. Whether you want to say they're good or bad, or they're better, that's up to you. But I do think
You go. No, you go.
Yeah, I do think AEW has a ton that they can do. There's definitely segments that they can do that are different, that are unique, that are something like unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's like with music. People say this all the time. Are we ever going to run out of music? No, we're not. There's always going to be people that look at things differently. There's going to be different perspectives, different philosophies. And that's just what it's going to be. And I think AEW, maybe they could benefit from a change of scenery. Bring in, somebody, a different writer. Maybe let Matt Hardy oversee creative for a little bit. See what happens with that, or somebody else. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there.
Yeah, I mean that sounds better than the Elite booking the shows, but this is all Elite wrestling, so it's like even then. And I guess that we can tie this in to, I guess, what will pretty much be like the final part to this Tony Khan bio. When it comes to Tony Khan, his promotion, AEW, like, what do you think they can realistically improve on that's like practical that they can and what might actually do? Because I'll say this now, obviously they can try and cater the shows to a more casual audience. But as we've established, that's not what they're about anymore, seemingly, because they're about catering to their audience. Mm-hmm. And, if they get criticism for that, then, well, they're going to go into a shell and copyright claim people. Which that reminds us, Kevin, do you want to have an AEW and content creators discussion while we're here?
Oh, yeah, we might as well close with this. We might as well, yeah. So talking about the relationship that AEW has with journalists and content creators for a minute. I think it is one of complication. It's an obvious complicated relationship. It's something where I see and I'm like, wow, this is very disappointing. As somebody who is aspiring to be a journalist, who's studying journalism, I look at this where you've got Tony Khan responding to